Welcome to the Debian Diversity BoF. I'm thankful that a few people have turned up. I thought about starting to give a short background on how this diversity team got started and what ideas popped up, what we want to reach with it. So a short recap is in DebConf 16 in Cape Town. At the last day, I was approached by a few fellows who asked me, "Yeah, don't there's Debian women. Don't we want to start a Debian queers or something like that for LGBT people too?" So that was sort of the initial thought about behind it, and then a few months passed, and I thought about it, and we created a first IRC meeting, and at that point I already named the IRC channel Debian Diversity because to some degree naming it LGBTIQ focused too much on sexual and gender identities, and it also in the discussions beforehand it also came up whether it might still be a too limiting topic or thought about the issues that we are facing within marginalized groups within Debian. And it's not like that Debian is necessarily more hostile or specifically hostile towards minorities. I mean, I've been part of the Debian project since 20 years, and I had my coming out as being trans 15 years ago. And the Debian community was the first community and supportive for me there, um, and through the geographical diversity that an online community like the Debian project brings along with, we also had kind of diverse, not just geographical, but also based on origins where people are from. And when you're communicating via emails, the only thing is from another person you see is their name and not what they look like. So it created a sort of possibility to be more open and tolerant just because you didn't see the other people. And on the other hand, when we have events like DebConf, which is something about having talks and getting ideas out, but it's also a big social gathering where you're for first starting to meet up with new people, and then you start to realize, okay, I had a completely different picture in mind of the person I'm mailing back and forth with on a daily basis, and they just look like completely different. And like when you're reading mails from Sam, for instance, Sam Hartman, you wouldn't realize that he's blind, and that's just something that you might see through some of the packages or efforts he's involved with, but also a lot of other things play into this. And I always perceived the Debian community as quite welcoming, but then there are certain things happening, and I don't want to shine too much light on what happened, like at the DebConf in Mexico, or like what happened last December on Debian project, where a person right out denied to call people by their names and use proper pronouns for people, and said, okay, and discussions surrounding that, and people defending that statement, but it was polite, which it clearly wasn't, and things like that. So we really can do better on some degree, and especially we can make it and put it out more clearly that we are inclusive and welcoming people, and trying to find a way to deal with such situations. And when I think back a few years, 6 years ago, we had a conference, a mini DebConf in Barcelona, which was really, really awesome. It was the first Debian Women conference, mini DebConf. And it was a lot of people there, and the topic for the conference was, or the aim for the conference was, to create visibility for women and female identifying people. And so they said that everyone submitting a talk and giving a talk on premise is a person who is a woman, or at least womanhood is something that is very meaningful to them. And that created a very interesting concept, and I'm very thankful to have been part of that effort. And we had it the year later in Bucharest also, which was, to my experience, quite an interesting one. And I think ideas like that might something that we want to pick up, but on a more broader perspective. Like during the last two DebConfs, when we had these talks, people, even during DebConf, we usually have a Debian Women lunch where we sit together and then talk about things within the project which we could improve, or where we could find a place to work on issues. And during the last two DebConfs, during that lunch, it was somehow proposed by some people that it might make sense to sort of have the Debian Women effort merged into the diversity effort, which I find quite an interesting approach, and I think it's a good idea to merge these efforts, because you can create change if you have more people willing to work on the combined effort. And the thing that the diversity team, in my mind, is set up for is creating a movement and a momentum that will make it more inclusive and diverse in the end, to be more welcoming to underrepresented groups that we have within the project. And how we can get there, this is still one of the big miracles that I'm still facing, and I hope that there are other people willing to join in and also share their ideas and thoughts on that. So I sort of want to open the stage. If there are people listening in on the stream who think they might want to join in on the discussion, please send me a message on IRC and I can drop you the link to share this Jitsi meeting. For those who are already in, you have at the bottom left corner, you have this hand symbol. So I would recommend for everyone that wants to speak up and share some thoughts on it to raise their hand. So we can use this as sort of mini moderation tool and not just speak over each other. So who wants to add something, or should I nominate someone? I'm really bad at pointing at people because I don't want to pressure others into something that they didn't really sign up for. But I hope that, given that you're in the room now, I hope some of you are willing to share a few words. Yeah, please go, Chetan.
Okay, so since these efforts have started until now, how you have seen the growing of this diversity inside Debian and in other free software projects besides Debian? Rhonda, have you found in another free software communities a rise of this diversity importance that maybe in the past was not present?
Well, since last year's DebConf, I was approached by the GNOME team. They have monthly sessions. They have an inclusion and diversity in GNOME team specifically set out for that. And they invited me to speak about Debian in specifically and our efforts that we're going on here. So there is a collaboration going on. They have some Telegram chat they're using. And through that, I also stumbled into a more bigger group, which is called Debian Diversity and Inclusion in Open Source, which is shared amongst different projects and people exchanging information in there, how to improve, how to move forward. And I think it to some degree what is important is in cases of when incidents happen and people from minority groups, marginalized groups are reacting emotionally to it. people shouldn't jump at first to the person that is emotionally wound up and tell them to sort of watch their tone. But addressing, focusing more on the issue. We're very often trying to put forward like, yeah, please, can you say that in a more respectful way? Or when it actually wasn't disrespectful in the first sense, when people are pointing out discriminatory discriminations and discriminator behavior, that's not disrespectful or impolite. It's just a matter of fact that pointing out that other people acted impolite is also even received perceived impolite, and we have to work on this impulse to directly deflect being called that and think about what's going on and trying to walk through what happened. Yes, Srut? I'm not sure how to pronounce your name, but you have to unmute yourself, then you can clearly talk.
Honda, I assume you're speaking to me. I didn't get the name you
Yes, yeah,
pronounced.
you showed just up as Srut in the chat here, so I'm sorry that I.
Okay, yeah, it's me. Okay, like I wanted to talk about this geographic diversity as well as the gender diversity aspect. For the geographic thing, like if you take the example of India, we have a lot of IT professionals coming out from India, but somehow we don't have that many contributors to free software. And when you compare to like the amount of IT professionals and say the Debian developers in India, we have like 12 or something. So that is not a great number. So this is something we have been trying to address. One point I think is the amount of exposure people have with free software or with free software and Debian, especially when we are talking about the Debian thing. Like I can take the example of now we have a team of volunteers like setting up for DebConf in 2023 in India. So with that, I got a they were a group of free software enthusiasts that were not very active in Debian. But with this DebConf thing coming up, and we have a Malayalam track in this DebConf also. So when they are getting the opportunity to interact with the community, more and more people are getting to directly involve with the community. They are coming from the sidelines into kind of mainstream. So when you consider the geographic thing, I think exposure is a very important fact. Like we don't have a lot of trees of what you call Debian communities or hacker spaces or free software communities as compared to Western world. So that's a challenge where these students or people interested to contribute, how they get to interact, how they get the exposure is a big challenge here. And when we consider the gender aspect of the thing, the scenario is entirely different. We have a lot of restrictions on women, like when there is restriction on how much time they can spend online or We have people saying that their brother can spend like stay all night doing whatever they want, but girls are supposed to be like offline by so and so time. That's one thing. And there are other issues like they don't even have access to laptops, even when they are doing a computer science engineering course. So those are the things which are very systemic, which needs to be addressed, before which we cannot solve the gender aspect. But here we are trying a lot, like different approaches, how to make people more and more inclusive. And yeah, but I don't have a solid plan as such. And I'll be happy to work with you for any of the diversity related activities. Yeah, that's it.
Thanks. You were in parts not that easy to hear. I think that there was some network connection difficulties, but I think for most I understand what you meant. Let me try to sort of sum it up. You say that there's a lot of IT professionals coming from India, but just a handful or 10 to 12 are parts of the Debian community. And because there's not so much these hacker spaces or possibilities to sort of enroll the IT professionals from India and to get them involved in free software and in the Debian community in general. Did I sort of catch that properly?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, I see to some degree. I think it also boils down to at what time events like this happen, because you have to take into account different time zones around the world. When we went with DebConf all around the world, but for the most of the time we just were in the US and in Europe, and the schedules somehow were also mostly aligned to make it to accommodate it for Europeans and Americans when it's on in the other part, so to say. But with 2 years ago when we were in Taiwan, which was our first conference in Asia, um, it had a completely different schedule and made it possible for other people to join in. That this is also one of the biggest aspects why we move every year with the Debian conference to a different world, so that people who are locally there are able to attend the conference and not just have it like where most people are located. Because when you just do it where most people are, then you will create a more density in the area where you already have a lot of people. We need to go to places to make to create the momentum and to make it possible for others to join. And this is a very for me, this is one of the biggest possibilities that DebConf has with creating the conferences all around the globe, and with the improvement on mini DebConfs, I think we are even getting better here to have like smaller Debian conferences, but also more local in the areas. Like, for instance, if you take last year's Debian conference in Curitiba, they had mini conferences before where they sort of enrolled, so to say, the people to create the regular yearly DebConf there. And I think having small conferences throughout the year in different areas of the world would create this possibility to strengthen the local communities around the world. What you said about the gender diversity, I'm not completely sure if I followed that in as a whole, but can you maybe just add a sentence or two on that? What you meant with respect to that? Is it better in India in that regards?
Like we have more than 50% of engineering students are women, but they don't have the kind of freedom or what do you call the freedom, or and they have a lot of restrictions. They don't have a proper laptop with them. They have limitations on, like, they can't be online for a long time. Like, girls are supposed to be not online, and those kind of restrictions around them are there. They don't have the freedom. But yes, we have, when you consider the number of IT professionals, women have very good percent. There are very good percentage of women, but in free software, it's really less than, like, not even 1%.
Okay, yeah. Someone else wants to join in the conversation? Yeah, please unmute yourself, and Andy, the floor is yours.
Thank you. A lot of this would be easier if instead of Debian Diversity, we could have just Debian Human. But most of the people don't understand what it is to be human. It's difficult. There are things that overlap. Each of us is a certain age, identifies with the gender. There are lots of characteristics. What do we do about people who have intersectionality, things that overlap? Where does that fit in?
I don't think that you can run a diversity team or effort without thinking of intersectionality in the first place, because then you create more spaces for something specific, and and there's always an intersection. Like there's this really great book by a black woman from Germany, titled what Germans don't want to hear about racism but need to hear, and she really speaks about this double discrimination that she faces as a black woman, and that she can't intersect or pin down if she's now belittled because she's a woman, or if she's belittled because she's black, or, which is more the more likely outcome, that she's belittled because she's a black woman. And this kind of double discrimination also happens, and I notice it in so many LGBT organizations, even here in Vienna, where you have queer groups which are not seeing the possibility of what they do towards people of color, and they just have their white stereotypical thinking within their own community, and when they are called out or pointed out the racism they have integrated into their thinking, they become totally defensive and say, yeah, but we are discriminated already, we can't discriminate others. And that's just not the way it works. So yes, intersectionality is a core value of every diversity effort and inclusion effort that lives up to its name. And I can understand when you say, yeah, we are all humans, but not all humans have it bad and have a disadvantage in this society. I, as a trans person, am discriminated every time I go to a toilet. A cis person can go to a toilet without even thinking about it. If I end up in the men's toilet, I get weird looks and shouted against. If I end up in the women's toilet, the same happens. And things like that. So to create, to put the focus on diversity and increasing visibility and possibilities to sustain in this society for marginalized groups and people is a must before we can say, okay, we are all humans. Because when we say we are all humans, we often say, okay, I don't care for your problems, struggles in this society. But the society is really, it's a systematic part, and we should make sure that we are not reproducing the systematic discrimination within the Debian community. And that's why I see really also the need for having a diversity effort.
Sure, that's what I meant. In some ways, when I say Debian humans, I mean really well-behaved humans that understand that everybody else is a human being, needs respect, and that kind of thing. We don't always live up to that.
Yeah, I I totally see a point and understand what you aim at. And when I think back to DebConf in Montreal, like where I think that was the last time that I saw Sven at DebConf, and he's a person in wheelchair, and he wasn't really able to properly attend the talks because the auditorium made it difficult for him to get to the front and be more directly part of the discussion. I don't want to call out specific DebConf Orga teams here, but the inclusion is something that really has to be thought through. And at some point, I really was kind of disappointed to have heard this statement, but someone really said, "Yeah, I'm kind of glad that Ottavio is not attending DebConf anymore. He's in a in an electric wheelchair, which is logistically kind of a difficulty. But if you only go to venues and make it possible for people to attend and only accommodate when you know that someone might have difficulties to attend, and not create the space from roots on to be inclusive and be able for people to attend without them having to think of may I be able to sit in the auditorium and watch the talks, or do I have to be in my room and watch it from the laptop? So we can really improve on the inclusion parts in that regards, and I know it's kind of difficult in a lot of spaces, but then we really should clearly also mark it out in the FAQs and make it clear and put it there that there were difficulties to get a better accessible place, and what the issues are there, and try to find creative ways to work around it, because we're a community of geeks. If we can't make something and find solutions to difficult problems, like in Heidelberg, we were laying out the internet cable for the dorm which held the conference throughout the zoo, and to be able to have proper internet on premise. So there is possibilities to do that. Someone else would want to talk? Yeah. I hope I don't pronounce the name wrongly. Paulo asked on IRC about color diversity. What might be ideas why we have so many, so little? Yeah, I picked up his typo on IRC. Why we have so little black and brown people within the Debian community. We're still mostly a white club, so to say, even though we have some sort of geodiversity which we definitely can improve on. But even then, it might be, I don't know. Is there something that plays into having mostly white people within the Debian community? One thing that I might think of plays into it, that you have to have access to a computer and to proper internet. And that sort of plays often into classicism and everything that comes with that, and that often also plays into racial imbalance. But Leslie, you raised your hand.
So one of the issues is often time. It's not always considered that, and again, it plays into this the classism stuff that you just mentioned. But in order to have time, in order to be able to volunteer to do things, you have to have time, and you have to have sufficient funds that will cover that time. So that you don't need to be using that time to do something else. I just wanted to pick up on a couple of other points that had come up. Intersectionality, something I discussed earlier in the week with my feminist theory group. You can't actually tear apart the various identities within an intersectional identity. It is a whole. It's a very messy whole, but it is a whole, and much as Rhoda was saying, yeah, if you are a Black woman, you will be discriminated because you're black, because you're a woman, but also because you're a black woman, and it's almost impossible to tell at any time whether the discrimination is one or the other or the other. What else? Yeah, we struggle. We are a microcosm within the various societies we live in. And so we're always going to struggle with the fact that the external forces acting on the people within the group are going to bring their own problems with them. So if there are already discriminations outside, that's going to come into Debian. What we need to find is ways of making, mitigating those as far as we can. And certainly with the inclusivity problems that we've seen at DebConf, one of the ideas that comes to mind is that possibly we need to have just some sort of document or something that just sets out, these are the things you might want to consider, and if you can't consider those, please make it very clear that you have at least tried to, so that it doesn't, because one of the problems is if you don't fall into one of these discriminatory groups, one of these minority groups, one of these marginalized groups, you often don't even see the problem. So it sometimes just helps have much as I hate the idea of a checklist, it's nice. It is just useful particularly for organizations to be able to go, have we thought of everything yet? So that may be something that we can possibly feed into the process by either suggesting that org teams come to us and ask, hey, have we considered everything we need to? Or, as I say, just by providing a living document saying, these are the things that you might want to consider because we know that they come up as a problem, and if you don't consider them, or if you aren't able to do anything about them, then it's important to let people know so that they have an understanding of what they're getting into. And I think I'll stop there.
Andy, you raised your hand. Do you want to add a few points? You're still muted.
No, that was in error. I don't need to add any more.
Ah, okay, good. One thought was going through my head when Leslie talked about it, and yeah, the thing of if you have to think about how you get into the next week and how you get your food, you get to your food and have to care for your children, which is also still the systematic oppression that leads to the reason why there's so little women in the tech community, because often they are like the most of the care work within families is put on the women's shoulders. If there are kids involved, if there are anything household involved, even if it's just a heterosexual couple, a man and a woman living together without kids, the care for a household is usually also not very evenly distributed, and all these things lead to less women within the tech community too, even though they are interested, because they have less time to invest it. And the same goes then for people in precarious situation. So of course, to some degree, the Debian community has a lot of academic background, and that plays into the demographics. So the way to move forward might be to find ways to support people to find more time for them, and sort of also through scholarships outreachy, which we had been using, and all of this. Yeah, now I remembered my thought from before. In the previous talk, I was speaking about the Fediverse and a really great Black community I'm following there. And it, even though people highly praise the Fediverse of being so great for and increasing diversity, it still is a reflection of the society, and through that you still have a lot of white racist people, cis people on the Fediverse too, even though it has great communities and great diverse communities within certain servers or areas within the Fediverse. So yes, everything is sort of reflecting through the society. So we really have to work on the society to improve here. But that doesn't mean that we can't still try to improve it on within the Debian community. So I think that might be a useful final words, unless someone wants to have a last say. I think, yeah, Chatan raised his hand.
Yes, just a thanks to everybody to attend this wonderful BoF. We're on off of time. So thank you very much, Rhonda, and everyone.